Please welcome His Excellency Dr. S. Shankar, Minister of External Affairs, Government of India, for the keynote address. Welcome to Panama.
Distinguished ministerial colleagues, members of the business community, friends and well-wishers from other walks of life who are taking an interest today. A very good afternoon to all of you. And let me begin by expressing my appreciation to CAF and CII and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Trade and Industry and my own ministry for organizing this event. I arrived this morning on a super red-eye flight, and after a few cups of strong and excellent Panamanian coffee, set out to pay my respects to the President. We had, I think, as Mr. Tebani said, a very deep, for me, a very insightful conversation, listening to his views, his guidance, and then a very good session between the delegations of the two governments. So, motivated by the President, encouraged by the ministerial conversation and strengthened by the coffee, I will follow Minister Tebani and do away with my prepared text. What I would like you to do is, for the next few minutes, please pay attention as I list out 10 important reasons why I believe that Indo-Panama economic business collaboration is important, why I believe it has very good prospects, and therefore why we must work towards that objective. The first, from an Indian perspective, is that as the fifth largest economy currently in nominal terms, but one which has clearly very strong growth prospects for many decades to come, India will be more and more present in different corners of the world. This is just a matter of common sense in a way. And I would say, whether we view it from the Latin American end or even from the Indian end, and in an economy of this size will surely shrink distances, and that you can already see happening. It's also happening because within India there is a very profound transformation, a transformation which has seen, which is visible in terms of digital delivery, in terms of renewed interest in manufacturing, in an unprecedented coming together of infrastructure initiatives, and of course a growing innovation and startup culture. So my first point, India is big, it will get bigger, it will get closer, it will be much more in your lives than it has been in the last few decades. The second is a proof of the first. Our trade is today approaching a $50 billion level. And to me, it's interesting not that just the numbers there, but also the composition of the trade, that it's a much more diversified trade basket, and that it's, in fact, its energy component. There have been times when we've hit strong numbers, but those have been largely driven by energy. This time around, it's a much more broad-based trade growth. But along with that, also a very significant increase in Indian investment. So whether it is today mining or energy or agro-industry or even I would say infrastructure projects, you have an Indian presence there which wasn't there 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago, and I can again confidently predict that this will only grow with the passage of time. The third factor are Indian exports. During the COVID period, we were not just busy coping with the pandemic. Prime Minister Modi consciously decided that he would use this time to initiate long-awaited reforms in India. Whether it was recapitalizing our banks, providing the necessary support for MSMEs, getting started up a lot of infrastructure projects which were pending. The result of all of that today is you have a much more competitive Indian industry, and it's visible in a record export this year of $770 billion. And just for our Panamanian friends to put that into some kind of perspective, I would say pre-COVID and post-COVID, we've seen almost $100 billion growth in our exports in manufactured goods. Now, a fourth reason. The fourth reason actually derives from the pandemic. In the course of the pandemic, India established its reputation as a pharmacy of the world by providing vaccines to almost 100 countries, medicines to 150 countries, and on a scale, because in many cases you actually had a 3x, 4x, 5x increase in demand during the pandemic. So to be able, it wasn't just the footprint of the Indian pharmaceutical industry, it was actually their ability to ramp it up at the right time. So for a world which values health as never before, the pharmacy of the world is going to be much more important in your lives. The fifth reason is actually the enormous progress that has been made in terms of digital delivery. Digital delivery in terms of public goods, digital delivery in terms of the tools of business as well. So we actually today, and I say this from the perspective of governance, we are today implementing schemes, programs in India which run to hundreds of millions of people. Our equivalent of the food stamp program has 800 million beneficiaries. Our health program covers 1/3 of the country. Our direct payments into people's account is more than 400 million people. The houses we provided, and all of this is digital, because at the end of the day, it is the digital backbone which allows the validation of these programs and ensuring that the benefits reach with the integrity that they deserve. So you are seeing actually an enormous digital transformation in India. Now, I'm giving you only the governance perspective. There is the business perspective. What digital has done, how it has made old businesses more efficient and spawned a range of new businesses. Today, the idea of distance health and distance education, these are not cop-outs because you could not deliver the real thing. They are seen actually as very powerful supplements, in some cases actually as the primary medium for delivering on various demands of society. But it has also changed the mindsets of people. I mean, this is the country with the cheapest data access, whose ownership of smartphones has just exploded, where today people are connected to the world as never before. So the digital transformation actually has a very, very profound impact on this society. And that again, I would suggest to you, will have an implication, because if you take a region like Latin America, which previously people thought as being very distant, today neither someone in business, nor a private citizen, nor a government, nor a pharmaceutical supplier actually thinks of distance anymore. My sixth reason is actually in regard to the manufacturing pickup. And the manufacturing pickup, you can see it's been propelled by something called production-linked incentives, but that's only the cutting edge of what has changed. There is actually a broader support to creation of vendor chains in India, of support for MSMEs, of encouraging businesses to be competitive. And, at one level, the statement we all like to make today is to show Apple as a proof of changing India, that if Apple products are made in India, obviously something profoundly has changed in India. But again, I think it's a very, in a way, it's not necessarily even a representative example. I think what has really changed in India is our ability to produce goods on a scale to meet middle-class consumer demands. And as Latin America gets more middle-classized, I would suggest that there's a natural fit between an economy like India, which itself targets the middle class in such a strong manner. There is another aspect as well, and that is the Indian capability of projects, of project execution. This too has grown in the last 2 decades, very slowly, imperceptibly. Often, I must tell you, the government doesn't even know it. It's only when people like me travel abroad and we have the good fortune of meeting our business colleagues that we get to know often what they are doing. And it's actually quite an amazing story, that there's probably at least a good proportion of the countries in this region, in some form or the other. I mean, it could be agriculture, it could be mining, it could be the power side, that there are today important projects which are being undertaken. In fact, my previous stop, I went and visited some of them. And this ability of India, so you have not only made in India in manufacturing, you increasingly have delivered by India in terms of projects. And that too, I would suggest, because I think many of our companies are globally competitive in the area of project delivery, that it is something that you should be looking at. There is, of course, an aspect of business which is not often associated with India, and that is actually what Indian agriculture is doing, the kind of yields that it is producing, the kind of technologies that it is employing. Even the digital story actually has directed this, impacted it very directly. And I'm really very pleased today that we have in our midst, as the leader of the CII delegation, somebody who in many ways exemplifies that story, who's for us an established footprint in this part of the world. And so when it comes to the agriculture side of business as well, I want to emphasize is that India is very much a player there. Then, of course, there is the Indian brand. And the Indian brand, many of you know, especially after Y2K, was very much a techie brand. This is India, the IT country, which has delivery centers across the world, and it does. And it does, particularly in this geography and in languages which are, I mean, this is probably the most widely spoken language in the world. And so again, there are multiple centers or multiple companies which today have established the business. But I point out that what we used to call the IT business, but which is increasingly actually a digital business, this business today is moving towards a new I would say, filter, a new kind of benchmark, and that is that of being a trusted partner. The digital domain is a very sensitive domain. So who you work with, whether it's a company, whether it's a country, where your data goes, where it resides, who processes it, all these today are extraordinarily sensitive issues in global politics. And again, I would say to countries where, which are market economies, which are political democracies, which are pluralistic societies. The digital domain will find comfort in working in these societies. And here too, I would suggest that, there is much that India and Panama can do with each other. And my last point is actually a point of talent and skills. That when, Mr. Modi came to power 9 years ago, one of the very early points he made to us was that don't think of the world just as a marketplace. The world is also a workplace. And if we think of the world as a workplace, it is important to prepare and to polish our human resources so that we can get full advantage of that. So when you look at initiatives in India, initiatives like Skill India, Startup India, Digital India, the new education policies, these are all actually small pieces of a large mosaic. A mosaic today where you can see Indian talent and Indian skills much more active in terms of mobility. That the demand for them in countries ranging from Germany and UK on the one hand to Japan and Australia on the other, this is rising. So these, to my mind, are 10 important reasons why we need to prepare for a deeper engagement between India and Latin America. And then I would like to come specifically to an issue which I heard previous speakers mention, which was also prominent in my own discussions, and that was the issue of Panama as a hub. Now, there are hubs, and we Indians perhaps know this better than anybody else. We have a hub to the east called Singapore. We have a hub to the west called Dubai. We have a hub further west historically called London, which UK, which for many years has serviced a lot of our operations in Europe. We had a hub still further west in New York, which for us, again, was an operational point for much of what was happening in the Western Hemisphere. But we are today moving into a different world. It's a world in a way of much more decentralized globalization, where different regions will have their own autonomous logic, their own development, their own priorities, their own particular character. And so when we look from sitting in India at the rest of the world, think of our growing footprint as the 5th largest economy and expanding. Think of all the other capabilities that I'm talking to you about. Greater investments, more exports, larger number of projects. Then the question naturally arises, what is the attraction of additional hubs? So it is really, in a sense, a question waiting to be asked. Now, how credible, how effective that hub would be, I think depends obviously very much on the country concerned, in this case Panama. Because at the end of the day, I think all of us know that the attraction of the hub is really the enabling environment in totality. That it is connectivity, it is mobility, it is the regulatory system, it is the financial system, it is the quality of governance. I mean, there are 100 parameters and probably more by which hubs are built. So what I can say is, as our Panamanian partners go about that enterprise, from the Indian side, there is surely interest. There is surely interest because, as I said, I can only see a future, short-term, medium-term, long-term, where our interest in this region, our presence in this region, our business in this region is going to grow. So there is, for us, there will always be a demand for an efficient center from where our business operations can be conducted. So in a way, I would say it's an interesting conversation today. Certainly, in a way, it's also a challenge for our hosts. But it is a challenge where we are willing to work with you. And for me, one of the important takeaways from my call on the President this morning was his very strong interest in this regard, particularly centered around a certain set of priority industries. So I have committed to him, and I seek the indulgence of CII here. I have committed to him that when you do the Latin America summit this year, that it would be an opportunity to welcome a business delegation from here. Certainly, they should get full value of what CII would be doing. But beyond that, I would certainly like to see much more focused engagement between business of Panama and the relevant business of India. So once again, I want to say that it's been an enormous pleasure to be here. It's a journey I've long wanted to make. I promised the minister in the beginning of the year that I would come. And I hope that, our meeting today is one of many, and each time we meet, we have accomplishments to talk about, but also higher goals to set for ourselves. Thank you very much.